Hey everybody, and welcome to the CineFix Top 100, the impenetrable bureaucracy through which we must struggle to watch 100 of the greatest movies ever made. I'm Clint Gage, and with me as always, Deputy Section Chief of the Parks Department, Alex Stedman, and paperwork enthusiast, Michael Calabro. Alex, Cal, how we doing?
Good. What's good, Clint?
Those are our jobs.
You ready to push some paper, bro?
Yeah.
I'm ready to move. I've got 2 stacks of paper that are slightly unequal, and my whole job today is to make them about the same size.
And also direct other
That
people
sounds
to other
about right.
departments.
Do you see that thing right over there?
Exactly.
You see that thing right over there? Yeah?
No, I don't.
No, you do. You know why? Because that's just like your life passing you by right now.
Wow. I did not know where you were going with that.
Yeah.
I didn't either.
Here we are, wasting our lives away talking about movies for the internet because we're the only people that do
This is a good movie to talk about it with, though.
Great. This is a great movie to talk about, and honestly, it's a very heady conversation we're having right now, having not revealed what movie we're talking about. Although, if you're listening to this, you clicked on something that said the title of the movie we're talking about today, so I'm less worried about that. But before we do reveal the shocking truth of what movie we're talking about today, season 3. This puts us 3 episodes deep into season 3, into our Alone Against the World season. How are we enjoying the theme so far?
It's a change of pace, I would say. I think I said at the end of season 2 that I would really miss Community, because I'm an easy mark for stuff like found families, etc. I love the power of friendship, but I'm here for this. I'm on the journey, and a
lot more warm feelings in Community than there are.
There
Alone
are.
Against the World.
Yeah, it's broader than you think too. Like I don't know how to, but I'm enjoying it. It's a little more existential, especially with a movie like this.
I was having a good time until you shot down one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Well, listen, that is the other part of the Alone Against the World season is one of us alone is allowed to boot a movie off the list regardless of how the other two feel about it. An honor that I took full advantage of last week by booting Uncut Gems.
Masterpiece.
But
And I got away with murder because I agreed, but I didn't have to say anything.
You were going to do it anyway, right? Yeah, so I'm taking all the heat for it. But as the one who booted the movie, I was not allowed to participate in picking the next one. But you guys landed on another thematically super on-point movie in Akira Kurosawa's Ikiru.
We were saying, and not to interrupt, but we were saying this is the anti-Uncut Gems. Yeah. This is the movie for not honestly, getting caught up in the BS.
Yeah, this is the anti.
This really worked out to be a wonderful little double feature. Because my favorite part about this thing is that we replaced one movie that opens on a shot of a guy's asshole with another movie that opens on a shot of a guy's asshole.
Wait, how did I not
this movie
that?
This movie opens on an X-ray of Kenji Watanabe's stomach, revealing the cancer that's in his stomach.
Wait, do you think that was an inspo for Uncut Gems? Now I want to know.
I don't know.
It might have been.
All I keep on thinking about is like I just keep on seeing the poster of Watanabe on the swing, and I just keep on thinking of like this is how I win, like right underneath it.
By understanding the meaning of life, yes, that is how you win.
I honestly desperately need that T-shirt.
Merch idea. Hey,
yeah, there it is.
Job.
If we had a CineFix T-shirt,
we need to start. We need to figure that out. See if anybody will actually buy them. But Ikiru, 1952. It's a story of a guy named Kenji Watanabe, an aging bureaucrat. He's got 30 years on the job under his belt. He discovers that he's got stomach cancer and only like 6 months to live. And then so he uses that time that he's got left to try to properly live with his remaining days, trying to do something good with the time he's got left. So first question is the same first question for most of these episodes. What is your relationship with this movie? When was the first time you saw it?
I think I said this during the Seven Samurai episode. There was a point in the pandemic where I was like, I don't have a good education on Kurosawa. I'm just going to do it all. So I first watched this movie in 2020, which was a good time to watch it, I feel, when there was a lot of death and uncertainty in the world. But I hadn't returned to it since then. And coming back to it now, like, there's just something about this movie that just gets into your soul and makes you think about stuff. I feel like I was really kind of lost in the sauce, dealing with some stressful work projects, and then I had to watch this again, and I was like, oh, man, none of it matters.
You can sort of watch this movie and easily fall into this movie's about me. And then kind of forget about 100%. The rest of the movie.
Yeah, I was like, I'm supposed to watch this right now. This is about me. Mm-hmm. But no, that's when I first watched. When did you first? Is this your first time?
Yeah, this is my first time. So the first time I watched this movie was
you've never seen it?
3 days ago. It was great. I mean, like, listen, like when I was in college and I was like, ooh, I'm going to watch some foreign cinema, I generally defaulted to the French. Like, I've seen a lot of French movies and like a lot of European cinema, and like when it came to the Japanese, it's like I've seen a couple Kurosawa movies. Some I'm more familiar with than others. Like, you know, I saw Rashomon in college, and I've seen it a couple times before. I've seen like Throne of Blood and Yojimbo and The Seventh Samurai. But even when we watched The Seventh Samurai for the episode, it's like I remember watching it in college, and it clearly didn't stick with me as much as it does now after that viewing. And this is maybe one of the better Kurosawa movies. And I mean, Clint, I was telling you this earlier. This is, in my humble opinion, the greatest Frank Capra movie I have ever seen.
Yeah.
That's good.
I mean, it's, I made the same note in rewatching it this time. So for me, like I saw in college, 20-year-old Clint probably slept through it, to be perfectly honest. But 42-year-old father of two Clint, like this movie hits different. Now,
It really.
I think cannot stress that enough. I dropped the episode's first F-bomb before you did, Cal, just to emphasize the point.
This is an odd episode.
This movie like hits so much different as you get older. Like it's one that really trades on the experience of at least you know, I won't speak for you guys, but I know very little about post-war Japan. You know, outside of watching Kurosawa films, that's all I ultimately.
I think
know
it's
about.
universal.
But reading some of the, well, that's the thing. It's like reading some of the critical work around it, and then, you know, thinking about my own feelings of the movie too. It's, you know, dealing with all this stuff from bureaucracy to, you know, declining family values of the day, and you know, how all of that weighs on a person and their ability to live their life, and blah blah blah. Like everything that this movie was dealing with in the time that they're making it. Still, what the most fascinating thing I think about this movie is that how relatable it still is.
You know what? And I bet in like when you watch this in like 20 years, it's gonna feel just as good and different. You know, like with like a little more with a longer walk down like that path of life, you're gonna like look back at this movie, rewatch it, and it's gonna hit in a different way. That's gonna be equally or more powerful. Like you could just feel it watching it now, knowing that this is like, it's a very wise movie.
I think one of the things that really struck me about it too is like I remember I was describing it to a friend because I was saying that I was watching it, and I was saying, oh, you know, it's about a man who finds out he has, you know, a couple months left to live, and he builds a playground. And it sounds like a Hallmark movie, but there is some cynicism to it. Like you were saying, Clint, I mean, I think it's actually very critical of Japan's bureaucracy at the time. It's very critical about family values, and like the father-son relationship is heartbreaking. Yep. But the fact that it's still quite cynical and ends up being like you walk away from it with your life a little affirmed, I don't know how it manages to do that. It's so well done.
I agree. I do think this is an oddly hopeful film.
Yeah, and I feel like it shouldn't be.
I think that there's a strange and unexpected dose of positivity that comes out of this movie. But a movie that is undeniably, and I will not argue with you about how utterly sad it is for the entire runtime. But like the aftertaste is something that's kind of nice.
But that's what makes it Capra-esque, right? Like, so like,
well, that and the VO,
yeah, right. But like, what makes it such a good what makes it such a good movie? Like a Kurosawa movie, but I'm sorry I keep on like referencing Capra, right? But like, this is very much in the vein of like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or It's a Wonderful Life.
The note that I wrote down was like, oh, this is just It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah. And
so It's a Wonderful Life.
Right? And,
yeah.
But like, where it hits harder is like the dark parts are just so emotionally relevant, right? Like the bender he goes on with the writer. The thing I want to talk about later when we get into like brilliant moments is how he uses baseball as a metaphor for his own son, like for his like own son's shortcomings in life. Like that is 4 shots, and it says 4 shots and like maybe 2 lines of dialogue, and it says everything about his son that like when you flash back into the present time, it all correlates. It's nuts.
I want to talk about that too, because there's a couple of moments in this movie that I would kind of describe as megamontages.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's one of them. There's we'll get to a couple of them when we get into brilliant moments. But to finish off some of the pedigree of the movie, like it won a handful of awards in Japan and then a couple internationally. It was nominated for a BAFTA and it got recognition. One of the funny things that I found, and I hope I'm not ruining a torf, is when it was originally released, it was released very small, limited in 1952 in the year it came out in the States, but under the title Doomed, and the poster for it had the stripper from that one scene.
I think you're good on the dwarf, but I also did read that. And the fact
I want that. I want that poster.
Wild. I tracked down a version of the American poster, but it was from the 60s. It was from the release from a couple years later, and it was retitled back to Ikiru, but it still had the stripper on the post. Like the stripper's this tall, and then everybody else is just kind of like outlines. Like it's.
Oh my God.
It is. Yeah.
Can you imagine knowing nothing else and going to see that movie based on the poster?
That is an incredible.
The fact that this is the poster, people were like, yeah, this is what we want people to go see.
Do you know? You know what this reminds me of?
It is so funny to me.
Do you ever see those like Polish movie posters that are just like hand drawn for like Star Wars and stuff like that? Like they never saw. They never saw the movie before they like made the poster, so it's just like these like obscure works of art that have nothing to do with the movie. This is hilarious.
Well, even more than the stripper, though, like the name Doomed, I feel like is so antithetical to like what the true message of the movie is. Oh my God, it is a tough film to market, though. I'll say.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, if it's like, well, we might as well trick a few people into showing up and paying us money. But in Kurosawa's filmography, this is sandwiched kind of right between Rashomon in 1950 and Seven Samurai in 54.
What a run!
He had one other mixed in there. He one other little easy piece of film, a Dostoevsky adaptation of The Idiot was mixed in there as well in that era. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's hard to say with a guy like Kurosawa. It's kind of hard to point to a high watermark for a career like that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the Rashomon into Ikiru into Seven Samurai is like the start of something like an 8 or 10 year plateau of just like Mount Rushmore kind of works.
And I love that plateau.
Then he goes on to later in the 50s.
But like
the highest plateau of plateau.
No, but it is a high goddamn plateau. You know, like it's all tied for first for like 10 years because then you also get Throne of Blood and Hidden Fortress and. You know, in the 60s, it's Yojimbo and Sanjuro and High and Low and all the, but he had like a 10-year peak in there that's just all incredible classic stuff. And Ikiru was kind of right at the front edge of this, which is,
I think what really like gets me about Kurosawa too, and I feel like I don't see people talk about it enough, and maybe this is just because like I kind of like marathoned Kurosawa in a way that people don't usually do. What really strikes me about him is less as a filmmaker and more as like a philosopher. There is something really deep that he gets about the human condition, and it's not just in Ikiru. I see it. I don't even remember if I really talked about it in Seven Samurai, but what really struck me about Seven Samurai was like kind of a bunch of people experiencing the same thing, and yet such a diversity in the way that they reacted to it and internalized it, and you see that in the movie. This one is a completely different kind of philosophy. But it's so real. He just like gets living. I don't know what it is, but it just blows me away. I think there was something really wise about him, and I don't think people talk about it enough.
I mean, whatever it is, like that's why we're still talking about his movies.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a 70-year-old movie that we're sitting here watching, being like, "Yep, I hear you, bud." Like it's and like I get the same thing out of Billy Wilder's stuff too. Like I think there are those guys that like. Because, watching, like, obviously Sunset Boulevard, we talked about that early on in the show about how relevant that still is. And, movies like The Apartment that dealt with what I assume to be really modern issues, but in ways that were still very prescient, I assumed very ahead of their time. But really, it's like, no, there's just a universe. These guys get people and they get what it means to be a person and to have to live in this goddamn world. And so their work is somehow more relevant every year.
I mean, even some of the more...
And I don't know how they do it. I don't know there's no secret to it, obviously, because there's only a handful of those guys in the history of cinema. So, like, a couple people are lucky enough to really get it. Let's get into some brilliant moments. What do we want to talk about first, guys?
Honestly, let's just talk about, like, There's two moments that I want to talk about, like right off the bat. Right, is the introduction of Watanabe, the way that he sets it up, and like they're in a basement, and he's just surrounded by all these documents, and it's just like his literal life is completely and utterly surrounded by bureaucracy, and it's like encroached in on him, and he's just like a little hermit and is like encased in bureaucracy. It's absolutely fascinating. And then like all the other people are sitting in front of him, they're talking about him, joking about him, like while he's like right there. It's so good.
And they're all so mean to him. If they said one more thing about that man's oily skin, I was gonna. But like, no, it is really like kind of symbolic and claustrophobic almost, the way that's shot. The whole world like closing in on you, which will be more prevalent as we go in. It's so well done.
You also get that with the aspect ratio too. I mean, it's a thing that we don't get a ton of. I've started to see more 4:3 as a choice crop up here lately, but like the narrower frame than what we are used to in 2024. Like it all just feels claustrophobic.
The Shining and Lighthouse are a good example of like deliberately chosen like Academy ratio in order to like emphasize the claustrophobia of this all, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that I really liked is when the women come to ask for the park, and then it's just like, oh, you got to go see this, and then it is a montage of them going to every department and just the buck being passed. That immediately reminded me of the scene in The Wire where Cuddy goes to try and get his gym off the ground, and I had no idea that was a direct homage to this.
Yeah.
Oh.
But like, and maybe this, like, I'm gonna just go ahead and assume that this is the first version of these bureaucracy montages. I don't know if it was done previously, but I feel like Kurosawa would be the kind of guy that like
if there was another one before it, it's not the one people are stealing from.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. There's just like
I do think before we move on to that megamont, that's the first of those mega montages I was talking about. The everybody passing the buck on who gets to deal with these people. But I do, because before we get too far away from us talking about the Capra of it all, like this narration in the opening, the things that he said, this isn't living, this isn't even worth watching. He says this isn't even worth watching in the first 2 minutes of a movie, which is a ballsy choice in a lot of ways. He might as well be a corpse. In reality, he does nothing. Like, this narrator is kind of a dick. Like, he's not wrong about it.
Everyone in this movie is a dick to this guy.
But even the narrator is being a jerk about this. And so there's like this, I don't know, there's a strange bluntness to this movie that you get right up front because of this narrator. And the narrator just literally saying, this isn't even worth watching. I love the...
He's not.
Yeah, and I love the little detail of him trying to clean off his stamp with the top sheet of a 20-year-old report on how to increase efficiency.
Yeah,
like that was great. Like
the report
opens
he
his desk
wrote.
drawer. There's a report he wrote in 1930, and he takes the top sheet off and cleans off his stamp and throws it away. Like that. That's such a fun little. But like this is, it's such a mean movie in a lot of ways.
It's very empathetic, but like, yes, it doesn't let Watanabe off the hook. It makes very clear, I think, from the beginning that he is choosing not to live, and it is him who needs to make that change. That's one of the things that I feel like is so not saccharine about it. Like, it's very, very hard on him. Like, they are not, like, they just, every scene, they're like, oh yeah, that guy's basically nothing.
And what's great about it too is
letting him off the hook is the right way to put it. Like I like that a lot. Like that's exactly, the movie does not let him off the hook.
Mostly because he has like some of the most cutting lines about himself too.
Oh yeah, he has a lot of self-loathing, which like just kind of killed me watching it.
But I already backtracked from the first little this montage of all the different places that the different departments that brush off these parents. One of the things that I love about this montage, just from a technical, like the nuts and bolts of it, is it's not technically direct address, right? But it feels like it is, and I think that's owed to the very first shot of it. Is like we see the women, and then the camera kind of moves, it trucks in and pans around and centers up on the guy that tells him to go somewhere else, and then every shot is framed like that end shot. until they get back to that original guy, and then it kind of comes back out to see the women again. So there's like a very conscious camera movement choice to what it does for me, and the feeling that I get out of it. I don't know how intentional. That's the fun thing about these movies. It's like I have no idea how intentional that was, like what he was thinking about with that. It was probably just a clever way to get into the edit. But the feeling that I get out of it is like you've got the fact that, you know, this camera move puts us in the parents' POV. Like they're engaging with these people. The people are looking directly at them, kind of just off camera, but it feels like it. Anyway, it's just a simple little camera move, but it puts us in the position of these frustrated people that are trying to get something done. And like, I feel ignored and I feel like not seen because I'm standing right in front of them, but they're not looking at me. Like it's really incredible, tiny little, like that little movement, and them just, because it would have been just as easy to be like, yeah, stare down the barrel of the lens and talk right to me. But the more effective thing is to like, look over here, you don't really see me, you're not paying attention. Like I thought it in how, I'm sure it was all on purpose.
That's
but
really interesting.
It was
because it is frustrating.
Yeah, it was such an effective
it's
such an effective montage for a couple of these tiny little reasons, I think.
It's frustrating to watch too, and I'll maybe come back to that when I talk about my favorite line of the movie, because it makes you mad to watch it. The other thing I like about this scene is how hot everyone is. Like everyone's sweating, everyone has fans. It just kind of like emphasizes how oppressive and miserable. I love when people use sweat and heat in movies, because no one likes sweating. No one likes being hot. It's such a nice touch.
No one is comfortable in this system.
No.
Like
no
this system is not good or healthy for anybody, including the people that are working in it.
You know what else is like, and we'll talk about this later too, is how later in the film, how he knows how to deal with that bureaucracy, right? Because like they just keep on pushing him off. So then those people will be like, all right, well, let me go talk to these people and like shuffle away. And like Watanabe has been part of the machine so long that like when he goes to talk to that guy, he just sits there and silently waits for him to go like look at his thing. Yeah. And it's just
I think
it doesn't cut away or it doesn't do anything. Like he lets the camera linger to build that tension. So like both the guy sitting at the desk and the audience feel like that lingering tension, like, all right, let me just look at it.
Well, that's something they bring up too, is like, for as much crap as they talk about Watanabe, they kind of make a few references about him being really good at his job, like almost too good, but they almost kind of mean it as an insult. It's like, oh, well, if he's gone, like, who's going to replace him? And there's like a line, I think, pretty early, maybe soon after this, where he stops going to work. And they're like, he's going to break a streak of not missing a day in like 30 years. It's like, well, that's sad.
Yeah.
If you haven't missed a day of work in 30 years.
It's that
without missing a day of work.
Yeah. It's that thing in like the beginning of Hot Fuzz where they're like, you're making us all look bad. And like, what that's
like, he's clearly good at his job, but that's not a great thing.
No, it's not. And they even emphasize it later too, right? When when people are trying to compliment Watanabe and they're like, no, he didn't do anything. It's the machine that did it. You know?
Yeah, and he was just a cog in the machine. That's all it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And real quick, you know, we might as well talk about this because we've talked about, let's put our finger on it a little bit, because we've talked a lot about like things that happen later, and he dies. I keep wanting to say right in the middle of the movie, but it's like 60-ish%, like 2/3 of the way.
I want to say it's like the third act is like the funeral, right? Like
it's a beefy third act though. Like, I mean, like runtime wise, I think it's something like 65% of the movie is where he dies. And but I keep wanting to say he dies right in the middle. Let's talk about that moment real quick, I guess. The cut from him like charging out the door, putting his rakish new hat on, which we can backtrack after this and talk about that, but like putting his hat on is like everything's possible if you put your mind to it, and he just charges out the door. Hard cut to a goddamn wake.
Yeah,
like, so he's dead. But then the whole back half is like we don't get to see. The first half is his perspective, right? We're very rooted with him. We're experiencing all this stuff in real time with him. And then this back half is all other people remembering him. And so like that change in perspective, like really like puts him in a different light in some scenes that are similar situations to what we saw him go through in the front half, which I thought was a really interesting thing.
So what I like about that too, right, is it contextualizes that choice in that moment, right? So the first half of the movie is all about him knowing he's going to die. So he's more or less trying to indulge in like pleasures of the self, right? He takes out 50,000 yen, which sounds like a lot of money, gets in with that novelist, and they just go on a bender, and like he doesn't really get any pleasure from that. Then he stumbles upon the young woman that works in his office, kind of has a crush on her. They hang out for a little bit. She's not entirely into him, but he's into her. Nevertheless, he's like, he's just trying to sugar daddy her for a moment, but like also no real pleasure in that. Then it cuts to then he realizes he's going to try and help he's going to try and help the community. And then that's when it cuts. And now it's a reflection on that decision from the perspective of the community, and thus like an echo of his slight bit of immortality, which I think is really great, which he wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Like if he just got drunk with the writer or married that woman, it would have just been one sad widow in that funeral, as opposed to like all of these people coming to be coming to begrudgingly give him credit for making that park.
But they got to get real drunk first.
Yeah, they got to get hammered.
Listen, sometimes you need a bender before coming to that kind of realization.
I'm pro bender. I'm just going to say
at least one, just one.
Multiple if you should get 4 benders a year. 1 a quarter.
Big theatrical play into the back row drunk is my favorite kind of acting, by the way. Like those guys were nailing it. But yeah, no, I mean, because that's why I'm so kind of obsessed with the dying in the middle part of this movie, is because like that, what you were saying there, Cal, like to me, like that's the whole point of the movie. Yeah. It's like this stuff feels pointless, but the world keeps spinning after you're gone, and the difference that you make like lasts. And so for the back half of this movie, or the back third of this movie, to just be people talking about that, talking about legacy, talking about like, oh, here's the things that he actually did do, and here's me continuing to think about this guy at all after he's dead, like that. And that to me, I think is some of the hopefulness, some of the like the good taste that it leaves in your mouth when it's done, is like the fact that he's because there's the one scene too where all the mothers from that asked for the park in the first place come to light incense for him. And like they're the ones that get it, and then they're the ones that mattered in the first place, And so like the fact that we get such a long time with just people remembering Watanabe, I think makes the movie. Yeah,
I'm just gonna say this one more time. This is how he wins.
This is how he wins.
This is how he wins.
I'm gonna make that T-shirt. Right, I'm gonna make that T-shirt for
the Ikiru. This is how I win T-shirt. You heard it here at CineFix Top 100. Sorry.
There's that old quote, and I don't remember where it comes from. There's this old quote that's like, a man dies 2 deaths. One is when his body dies, and the second one is when the last person says his name for the last time. And I feel like that is kind of the point of this movie. And I'm gonna make us talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once later in this, because I have it very high on my list. Spoiler alert. But what really stuck with me about that movie, what sticks with me about this movie, is that like nothing matters except for the way that you make people feel and like what you do for other people. And it sounds so cheesy. God, this is a good movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. You know what the word?
Such a good movie.
It makes me like feel warm inside.
It's so good.
The other thing I like about the whole like dying halfway, you don't see 2 really big things. I think one, you don't actually see him kind of like deteriorating physically very much. And they kind of set that up in the doctor scene in the beginning when they're talking about like, oh, and then the vomiting starts and the diarrhea and you can't keep anything down. And it's like they kind of almost let him keep his dignity in some ways, which I thought was really, really nice. And the other thing,
that's a really good point. That before you move on from that doctor scene, when I did flag that I kind of kicked myself as soon as I moved to the middle, because I was like, oh, I wanted to talk about that doctor scene.
Yeah,
like the blocking in that doctor scene, because like 1952, we don't have a lot of tricks as filmmakers, right? You've got blocking, you've got camera move, you got a little bit of camera movement, you got editing, right? And so here's a shot. It's all one shot. It is, the camera doesn't move a ton, like it repositions just a little bit, but it's a thing that you don't see a ton of anymore. It's one shot that changes 3 or 4 times in the length of its shot, right? So the weight of the frame changes. How trapped Watanabe feels by the information that he's getting changes. Like he starts to move a little closer to frame, and then the other guy kind of switches sides and kind of stands up a little bit, so he's looking down on it. And like the way that the camera, I don't know how long the shot is, but it's a lengthy shot because, like you say, they're rattling off all of these horrible things that are about to happen to him. And the way the frame changes and the way they block the actors in the frame to like make it mean something, make it more uncomfortable and feel like you're getting, you know, it's such an incredible thing. It's not a shot. It's not a frame that physically moves really at all, but it changes drastically from start to finish. It's an incredible shot, but it's all done through blocking. It's so good. And can we also talk about how doctors just straight up lie to people?
Yep.
He's like, tell him it's an ulcer.
Well, also
nothing we can do. Just tell him it's an ulcer.
Else notice like the little doctor interactions in this scene too. Like I swear, like there was like two of the doctors, like two of the younger doctors, are kind of like looking at each other, like kind of flirtily. I've noticed. Like,
the vibe that I got was that they were in their own bureaucracy because there was a younger doctor that was like, I feel like we ought to tell him, but I'm not going to say that out loud. You know?
And they didn't need to put that in there, but it was like this little kind of moment of like these people are living their own little lives too, and they're also fighting against like the oppression of bureaucracy. It's such a nice little touch that didn't need to be in there, but it really struck me at the time.
Anyway, I stepped in the middle of your list of two things just because I'm glad.
Oh no, but no, I'm glad you did because I feel like we jumped ahead really far.
We did.
Let me ask you this question. Is this the moment now where we talk about the cinematography at large in this film and how incredible the blocking
it's so intentional.
I think we've accidentally done that a couple times.
It's use of layering. Like the way it'll either push in to introduce new characters who will come in on the front, and it's like every shot has a very distinct foreground, middle ground, and background. It's incredible. And the way that like the camera will move to either introduce new elements, like just say like some mise-en-scène in the foreground, or introduce a new character, and it's going to create multiple layers of depth in those mid layers. It's just it's unbelievable cinematography. The one I keep on thinking of, and like my favorite, like one of my favorite shots is when they're on the bender and they're sitting there in that like beer hall drinking the beer, and then the trombones come into frame like a second before they play, and the trombones go, and then that's like when Watanabe like turns around, I'll just be like, oh, what? It's just like how Kurosawa is using like the frame to just visualize every sound, every blocking, every change, every nuance in character motivation, in relationship dynamics, using the visuals of the frame and the confines of the frame is just like next level. And to your point, Clint, right? Like that you just have so few tricks, but to be able to use these tricks at like this level.
My other favorite one is one that it's right when he leaves the doctor's office. I think he's leaving the doctor's office and he's very depressed, and about how Kurosawa is using all of these, using camera and using and sound too. In this one, he's walking down the street, super busy street, people running foreground, background. I think Watanabe even starts walking towards camera, gets to the sidewalk, turns to the left, and it's silent. But it's a busy street. There's sparks flying. There's a garage behind him. Like there's people doing work and then it's when he turns left again towards camera that he almost gets hit by a car. When he almost gets hit by a car, I think it honks at him or something, but that's when all the sound comes up.
Yeah.
And the street is super loud. And it's such a cool shot. And it's one that Aronofsky actually straight up stole. And did you guys ever see The Fountain?
Oh, yeah.
With Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz. It's the one that takes place in 1500, 2000, and 2500. Like it's all about immortality and the Tree of Life. Anyway, Aronofsky stole that shot verbatim for like with the way that the sound works and everything. There's a moment where Hugh Jackman is really sad because he's trying to save Rachel. He's trying to cure his wife's tumor before she dies, and he does this exact thing. To the point where he even walks past a garage where somebody's working on a car in the background or something like that. Like it is this same shot, but it's an incredible shot. I mean,
I also feel like
as few tricks as there are, the old tricks are always the best, you know?
I also feel like it's happened other times. Like, I feel like that's a common trope where someone's in their feelings and in their thoughts and they almost get hit by a car. Like, did Kurosawa make that? Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a common question. Did Kurosawa invent that?
That's
I thought it was invented. I thought that was invented by Mean Girls.
I did think of Mean Girls when I was saying that. I wasn't going to say it. But it's also not the first time he's almost hit by a car. And the second time is much different. It's during that Bender montage. And the second time, he doesn't give a crap, which I think is very significant about where he's at that point.
When he's just a guy trying to get his hat back.
He's just a guy trying to get his hat back, and he's going to die soon.
Who among us has not been that drunk guy trying to get his hat back?
Also, side note, I just like the fact that he loses his hat and then he buys a new hat and it's a white hat. So, like, even playing on the Western tropes of, like, he's the good guy now.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I love that. Yeah. I love that later it was described as rakish. Like, it feels like a pretty normal hat to me, but it's rakish.
I don't know. It was a nice hat.
Do we want to talk about the other mega montage now?
The baseball?
The father-son relationship?
I really want to talk about that one. Yeah. That one hit. I think
so. This is happening after. I think this starts after he hears his son and his daughter-in-law walking in, just talking shit about him.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, what an awful old miser he is, and and then they flip the light on and he's sitting right there, and then they're mad at him for that. It's just like it's such a weird thing. But then he's Mitsuo, his son. I've got thought. I want to ask when we get to the very end of the movie. I want to ask about how we feel about Watanabe's son. But the montage.
What I like about this montage, right, is two things. A, it is extremely efficient in exposition. And the second thing is, and to the point that we've been talking about earlier, is in two scenes, it is extremely efficient of not only establishing the dynamic of the son's intelligence, but the dynamic of the parent. And it also doesn't let Watanabe off the hook for being a bad dad, right? Like, that baseball scene is so good. In, like, 4 shots, it's like the son gets a hit, the dad is proud of his son, the son decides to get greedy and steal second, gets thrown out, the dad is embarrassed, the other guy calls him an idiot. And, like, that in a nutshell is the character of the son, who is just like a status-seeking, greedy kid that always wants more and isn't satisfied with what he has. But, like, not only does that perfectly sum up the son, but in the next scene, he's getting his appendix taken out, and his dad's like, oh, don't worry about it. This is a real common procedure. I got to go back to work.
I think his exact words were, I think I wrote it down. I was like, that's sad. It was like,
it's like, such a dismissive thing. It's like, I've got other stuff to do, basically.
And he's like, so vulnerable in that moment, like about to get surgery, looking up at his dad, being like, can you stay with me? And he's like, I've got some other stuff to do.
And that's what's so great about this, right?
And but we know what the other stuff is, right? Yeah. The other stuff is stacking paper in an office with your stamp. Like, that's all it is. It's not even worth watching,
It's so good. It's just so well. It's just so well done.
And it's the crazy thing about this montage to me is it's not that long, because I think I took time codes of it. I think it's like 5 to 6 minutes, but you get everything about their entire relationship. And if they hadn't included that, especially with the appendix and surgery part, I would have left hating Mitsuo. And I still don't come away loving him, but like, I would have felt betrayed too. Yeah. Like, you're about to get surgery and you just want your dad there?
Yeah.
And he's like, I got to go stack some papers. Like, again, this movie never, ever lets him off the hook.
So there's the one scene that we need to talk about more that we touched on a couple of times. It's during the bender, but the scene in the bar where he starts singing is such a... It's so... Man, it's sad. Like... As many times as when we were talking about La Samurai and saying it was cool, like, this movie is sad. But one of the things that I like about how he's singing the song in the bar, and again, like, and I never thought about it in the terms, and Alex, until you mentioned this about, like, never letting him off the hook. Like, there's a great energy in the front half of this movie that some of the other characters have that are like, you're giving me the creeps right now, dude. Like, he's not a comfortable guy to be around. And so here he is in a bar singing an incredibly sad song that just kills the vibe. Like, there's a woman that's dancing around and she's sitting on his lap, and she just, like, the way that she really slowly stands up and moves away. Like, it's like she's trying to make sure he doesn't notice that she's gone or something. Like, I don't know what but it's as soon as he starts singing and everybody in the place is just, it brings him all the way down. It doesn't seem like anybody is particularly stirred by it. Like nobody's there with him thinking about the things that he's thinking about, obviously, because there's only the one guy that knows what he's going through. But it's just such an interesting way to play that scene where everybody's a little weirded out by him instead of everybody being like, oh man, this guy's really going through it.
That's so funny that you say that, because I feel like I didn't even notice that, because I was so like with him in this moment, except for the woman like leaving the piano and her being a little creeped out. I did notice that.
Yeah.
But I was just so on his journey at this point that I just started crying when he started crying. I didn't even notice the people in the back.
I don't know. That might be the social anxiety but
listen, social anxiety is afraid of one time. It's not being
of me being like, oh god, like that's the word. That's part of why this is so bad, is like how weird everybody's now being about him. I'm like, that's so funny that's part of the nightmare too. Yeah.
Like when he just started crying and like the novelist just looking at him like open mouth. Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Also, we haven't said like Takashi Shimura yet. God, what a performance! Jesus.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Spoiler: he's my MVP.
I mean, yeah, but he's incredible.
Oh, or we can just skip that. We can just skip that whole segment then, because he's mine too.
He's also mine. Okay, we did it.
1 second.
High five. All right, we'll skip that one later. We'll touch. What happened?
What? He's had enough. Oh, I think he's gonna he's like, first, can you see him still?
Yeah.
Is it bothering you that much?
Pulled a muscle peeing, I guess.
Happens to the best of us. Do you want to try there's like pillow over there. Do you want to like try like laying against those?
Oh my god. I don't know if I can.
You can't even talk, dude. You're having a kidney stone right now, man.
Yeah.
All right, we welcome back, and I suppose before we move on, we should address Cal. What should we say? Fell ill?
Yeah, he was under the weather, I would say.
Under the weather, that's a good one.
Yeah,
sure, we could say that.
Not feeling 100%. Yeah.
Unable to continue. Yeah. No, that
sounds dramatic.
How about this? This is way too wholesome of an episode. We killed him off. He's dead.
We're being very meta right now. We are taking the same format as the film.
Sometimes the universe is just really looking out for you. And in our episode about Ikiru, one of us died 2/3 of the way through the episode.
I don't know if this is actually really messed up. We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. We'll find out later. My point is,
love you, buddy.
Alex and I will be, we'll, clearly he's not forgotten. We got our little shrine there with his beer. But let's continue talking. This works out great because now we can start to talk about Ikiru through the context of how much Calibro loved this movie.
He actually did.
Yeah. And I don't mean this as a dig on Calibro, but like for a movie that's this sort of sweet and wholesome, for him to respond to it so passionately was a bit of a surprise.
I had the same reaction. I think there's just something so universal and so empathetic about this like movie, and it was kind of what I was saying earlier about Kurosawa. Like, he just gets it. I don't know, something philosophical about that man.
Yeah.
But no, it surprised me that Cal liked it as much as he did.
But one thing, that he never got a chance to talk about, God bless him, the relationship that Watanabe sort of fosters with Toyo, the younger female employee, or his coworker.
Coworker, yeah.
But the relationship that they start to foster is really, really interesting, because it goes from, they run into each other on the street. He starts to be friendly, and he even buys her a new pair of stockings because she's got holes in hers and all of these. And it becomes this very sort of paternal thing, but it goes from that, like, it runs the gamut all the way from that to like full on, it's creepy. Like at one point she literally says, "You give me the creeps."
Mm-hmm. I really went back and forth like about how I felt about it, because at the beginning it almost seems like, I don't want to say like manic pixie dream girl, but it's very much like, here's the young, vibrant woman who's going to snap you out of whatever funk you're in. And that's her whole purpose in this movie. But as uncomfortable as that dinner scene was to watch, where he was kind of like trying to get her to stick around, and the scene that you were talking about where she's like, no, you're creeping me out. I think that was so important to put in there because it made her more like human. And we were talking earlier about that scene where he's playing the piano and everyone's like a little weirded out. And I was telling you, I didn't really like have the same reaction you did where I was like noticing the people in the background more. But in the scene where he's with Toyo, I was only like noticing her. I was like, oh man, I hate this. I hate this.
Yeah.
And I could.
So that's towards the end of what we see of their relationship, right? Because it starts with that like paternal thing and and then it gets to this place. The where it peaks for me is actually one scene earlier, because at some point he like tracks her down at her new job.
Yeah.
And he does the bit of blocking that did it for me. He does that thing where he like puts his hand on the wall behind her and kind of like leans toward her a little bit. Like it's that posture, which once he does that, I was like, oh, he's gone around the bend. Like he doesn't know what is happening. Because I think initially when they start their relationship, like he doesn't know what he wants. Like, and he says as much too. He's like, I don't know what I want out of it. But like at some point, that desperation that he's got, that he's been sort of keeping at bay, I guess, like really breaks through and makes a weird, strange mess of things. And to me, is like as soon as he did that lean, I was like, oh
no, and we're gone, and we're
going to places, and we don't need to go. Yeah, he needs to come back. Bring it back in. But yeah, the scene that I think really is really interesting is that last dinner that they have together. So like what's happening in the foreground at the beginning of the scene, there's a younger couple like cuddling in one of the booths. In the background of the scene, there's a birthday party. It looks, by the end of the scene, I think it's revealed that it's kind of a surprise birthday party, and all the friends are gathering there, and they bring in a cake in, and everybody's it's youthful and vibrant and excited. And then it kind of comes back into the plane of that they're sitting, opposite each other. There's this Toyo is sitting opposite of this old guy who's literally dying across the table from her. And like the juxtaposition of those two energies in this scene and the way that the camera moves to introduce all the stuff we've talked about already in terms of like how the frame expresses people's emotions and what we're like, it is an uncomfortable thing to watch because there's so much joy going on in that building and none of it is at that table. And it was quite the opposite. There's some like weird, desperate people at that table or person.
I think kind of what it is so much of this movie is Watanabe trying to like essentially speed run life, like him trying to fit in joy and human connection in the span of 6 months. And we've said it over and over again. This movie doesn't let him off the hook. The movie, I think in this scene, is telling you can't do that. You can't speed run a happy life where you have relationships. And you have around him all these people who haven't been, as the narrator said, basically like a boring corpse for their entire life. Like,
or the mummy. I'm mummified.
The mummy,
myself,
yeah.
Because that was his nickname, right? Yeah.
I think that's what keeps this movie from being saccharine. He tried, and it's a good thing that he did because his life was richer for it in the end. But you can't just squeeze it in your last 6 months. You're gonna freak people out, and it's not gonna be genuine.
The narrator asked that question at the very beginning, right? He's like, "Is it too late? And can he still do it?" And the answer seems to be it seems to be yes, ultimately, because he does the thing with but for this first half of the movie, the answer is definitely no, like not like this.
Yeah.
But I do like that part of their conversation too, because it reveals too that Toyo is, when Watanabe is like, how do I be like you? Like when he breaks, right? He breaks and he moves around to her side of the booth and he's kind of in her face, but like, would you tell me, like, how do I be happy like you? And she's just like, I'm not. I work and I eat and I sleep.
I make jokes and I'm like generally pretty lively, but that doesn't mean my life is perfect. I think that's so important to include that in there. Like, I think actually, like Kurosawa doesn't have always a ton of women in his movies, but I'm always kind of impressed with how they're portrayed. And I think I talked about this in Seven Samurai, kind of like the few women that are in that movie I find kind of fascinating. I find Toyo so fascinating. And she's also very funny. Like the little nicknames that she had for all their coworkers, which again, I said it before, talking crap about your coworkers, never going to go out of style. Universal.
Carp, yeah, we're gonna talk when we can offline about who's gonna be Carp Windsock at.
I should have wrote down some of the nicknames because they were really good.
Yeah, some of. I mean, that is one of the other things that about the movie, like the way that it handles humor. I think is one way. Not, and it's not that it's making jokes that aren't that are off color now or that aren't appropriate anymore or whatever, but like. It's more that it handles humor in a way that nobody does, and that doesn't quite hold up. Like as a technician, Kurosawa is unimpeachable, and he could make a movie right now, and it would be great. But like the way he handled comedy is just like, oh yeah, that's from the 50s. But like,
I don't know. I was still laughing. It held up for me. Well, it's funny too.
No, I mean, some of it's funny, but some of it's just like weird, visual irony too, which is the quiet brand of humor, but.
Well, it's funny when you talk about what holds up and what doesn't. My initial reaction to the whole Toyo relationship is like, oh, this is something that just doesn't hold up. But that was me kind of misunderstanding it before the dinner scene. It's like, it's not that it doesn't hold up. It's that he was being weird and we're supposed to be creeped out by it. So like, I kind of had to tell myself that, and I think it holds up.
And I like too that so much of the difference between the front half and the back half on that pivot where he dies is like it's portrayed as being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. He's not a comfortable guy to be around. Like, and the way that he behaves and the things that he does make people uncomfortable and make them, and because he's the only one that knows he's dying. And then cut to the wake, and everybody's talking about how there's one guy that tells a story about how that one time where Watanabe just sat there until the other bureaucrat looked at him. It's like in the front half of that movie, living through sort of Watanabe's point of view, like that's awkward. Like nobody wants to be around that. But in the back half, looking at it with retrospect and with some perspective, it's like a heroic gesture.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that this killing him halfway through the movie is you get away with that kind of thing, which is great.
I feel like there's rarely a straightforward verdict on Watanabe. Like, I think at the end, he's very clearly kind of made out to be the hero of the story, and he kind of has his redemption. But it's throughout the movie, you really don't know how to feel about this character. Like, you don't know if you you feel sorry for him, but it's also I mean, you haven't missed a day of work in 30 years. Maybe that could be the problem.
Yeah. Well, because it's tragic and it's a cautionary tale, and it's that Frank Capra suite, and it also has a weird amount of, a movie I found myself thinking about watching this movie again is A Ghost Story. Which A Ghost Story has that monologue in the middle, that hipster dude at a party in the house monologuing about legacy and about all you can do is hope to leave something behind after you're gone and things like that. And A Ghost Story has if not a conscious debt owed to Ikiru, they're treading similar ground, I think.
That would be a really good double feature, Ikiru and A Ghost Story.
Yeah, I don't need it in my
No, yeah, I think it would be a little heavy. Yeah. I think you would need to take a beat after.
Right.
It'd be interesting.
Right. I'm going to take a breath real quick before I double feature Ikiru and A Ghost Story. But...
That reminds me when I was catching up on Oscars a couple years ago, and I watched Moonlight and Manchester by the Sea in the same night. That was a rough evening for me.
Man.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's tough.
It was tough. For me, it really starts coming together when they do the flashbacks of him trying to make the playground. And we talked about this earlier. It's kind of fun to watch him know the system that he's trying to game, and that he is still struggling but still doing it well. The one that I highlighted just because I had to pause, and if you I tweeted it because I was just that stunned by it. And it's not even that deep of a line. It's him and one of his coworkers, and they're running into obstacle after obstacle, and his coworker doesn't understand why he's not angry. And he's why aren't you, he's treating you with such disrespect. Why are you not mad? And he just, says, I can't afford to hate people, man. I don't have the time.
I don't have the time.
I don't have the time. Because I think this was maybe still when they were trying to determine whether or not he knew he was dying. Yes, it is. Because that's when the coworker was no, he knew, because he said this to me. And then, they all kind of come to this realization where they're well, who among us has the time? We could get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Right.
And
right.
it's not just subtle, but it's where it kind of all comes together for me, and it's just when it became very heartwarming for me.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to that scene with Toyo, because that's the scene where at the tail end of that scene, he goes charging back with some determination, and then we cut back to the office, and that's when he's gathering all the paper, and we're going to go, you can do anything if you set your mind to it, all of a sudden, from Watanabe. His mutation, I think, is what they refer to it in the movie at one point.
Which is a really interesting way to put it, but it kind of is right.
Yeah. It's just a drastic change that they all notice. And then here they are at the wake trying to parse out why. And it's so funny how hard it is for them to believe it, too.
Yeah.
How hard it is for them to accept the idea that, like, he knew he was dying and he wanted to do something good for other people. Like, that explains it. Like, that's the Occam's razor of this whole scenario. But it's so difficult for them to get there. They got to get liquored up and argue and all kinds of stuff before they can kind of come to that realization, which is one of the lines that I wrote down. My favorite line in that whole back half is, it's so ludicrous, but it's perfect, is one of them says, if I had to say how that park got built, I'd say it was coincidence.
It just appeared there. Who knows?
He's giving more credit to a quirk of fate than was somebody actually efforting to make it happen, which is so funny to me. But
it's also like I just acknowledging how this story is, like, the structure with which it's told. I think when you kind of like read the synopsis of this movie, you think you're gonna see him like building the park, and you're gonna see him kind of go through this as he's building the park. But like I was saying earlier, you don't really see that outside of the flashbacks. And like the way that it goes, like you probably get maybe a month or two before he dies, before you get to the funeral, and then suddenly he's dead, and we're watching all these people trying to parse it together. It's such an interesting way to tell this story. I think it's why this movie's like actually kind of really entertaining for 2.5 hours. Like, it's such a hard switch.
It's interesting too, like talking about the structure of Kurosawa's story and thinking about Rashomon as well, and how that was such a sort of unique, informative structure, a way to tell a story.
Was this before? This was after Rashomon, right? Like a little bit after?
After, yeah. Rashomon was, because remember it was like Rashomon, a Dostoevsky movie, then Ikiru, then Seven Samurai.
Yeah. We did talk about this. Audience, we took a little break, so.
Yeah. If we find ourselves, if we repeat something and it sounds smart, it was for sure not Cal that said it the first time.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah. None of it. Cal didn't really do much on the front half of this episode. I mean, I think it was coincidence that he was here at all. So.
No, but that's such a good point about Rashomon too, because it's really told in the same way.
It's also about, memories being different at different times from different perspectives and being distorted on different accounts of things. And, it's very similar.
Gosh, that is a through line through everything he does. I mean, my favorite movies of his, Rashomon, The Seven Samurai, to me, it's all about like the diversity of how you experience life. Like, and that's so interesting. I hadn't really clicked with that before with Ikiru.
Well, I mean, but we've been talking this whole time about how he somehow gets it. Like,
he just gets it.
There are flavors of the human experience that he's just tapping into with every one of his movies. So.
Yeah, and I also like how the structure of the story actually proves its own point about like how the only thing that really matters is your legacy and like what you leave behind. And we don't really understand that until we see a group of people sitting around trying to discuss what he was doing. But again, like, some of the humor in the funeral scene is so wild to me too, though, because like they're just sitting there ragging on.
Yeah.
Like, he's dead.
Well, there's that one guy, right? There's that one guy that starts to get mad, and he's like, guys, it was Watanabe. He did this. This was his thing. And it was like,
not that guy.
All kinds of, no, it was my team, and it was his team. And, it's like, we didn't do it. He wasn't even in the Parks team. And it's, all of these things. And what's great about that guy is he's the guy that, they all come to the conclusion, slurring their speech there at the end, and they're like, hey, we're going to change our lives and be like Watanabe from now on. Everybody.
I love how drunk they are in that scene, just coming to this huge realization.
Again, like the playing to the back row drunk is my favorite especially back in like the 40s and 50s film. It's so much fun. Anyway, but then they go back to work the very next day, and they're just hiding behind their paperwork again. Like he even stands up to do something, and then he sits back down. But then he's the one that's I believe he's the one that's walking past the park at the very end.
Oh, is he?
And looking at the playground and the kids on the swing and everything.
Yeah.
I think that's the same guy.
Like,
which I hope it is. I'm sure it is, because that feels really nice. That there's at least one guy that is, maybe he's not doing it right now. He's not doing it yet. But the seeds of like, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to do these things, it's there.
Well, that's why I come away from Ikiru largely like optimistic. But it's not without like the cynicism. Like, it still is like, no, look at the bureaucracy is still the bureaucracy. Like, these people are not going to change. Like, they're still just going to keep on living their lives like mummies. But then you have...
And it's hard work, too.
Yeah. Like,
it's hard work doing anything about it.
He was speedrunning it, man, and he wouldn't have done it unless he was dying.
The only other thing that I want to talk about before we get away, go from brilliant moments is the very last time we see his son in Suo. He's kind of standing off to the side or in another room at the wake, holding the rakish hat.
It's a good hat.
And he says like how mad he is about the fact that Watanabe didn't tell him that he had stomach cancer.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great performance, I think, because ultimately I can't really tell where he's landing on it, because there's some degree of some of that usual anger towards his father that's coming across, but there's also like he's sad. I don't know. I think that's probably the point, is that you can't really tell where it, and it's a mixture of both, and all of the things are true. Like in terms of how he feels about what's just happened, about his dad dying and not telling him that he was dying, but doing this thing anyway. And so maybe there's a sense of tragedy seeping in on him about how he's wasted his time, and I don't really know where I come down on it.
A lot of times I see when like someone like loses a parent, but they weren't close to the parent, they say like that's often like the hardest one to process, because like you don't know what emotion to feel. And I think that's exactly what he's feeling. Like, he doesn't know if he should be sad. He doesn't know if he should be galvanized to live his life. He doesn't know if he should be angry. And that's what I really like about this movie, is that like nothing is really black and white. You would think that it should be this like cheery, like, oh, he was a hero. But it's like, no, at the end of the day, he still did his son wrong in a lot of ways. And his son also is kind of terrible to him in a lot of ways. And I don't think he knows how to process that. And I think that's a very human thing that, again, Kurosawa getting it. He's just getting it.
Yeah. Top 10 humans.
Top 10. He's definitely up there.
Yeah, in terms of getting it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think too that it's the idea that there's nothing outside of the park being built and kids enjoying playing on it. Nothing in this movie has a bow on it.
No,
right? Like nothing is resolved. Nothing is cheery. Nothing is like, there's not even a clear trajectory moving forward. Maybe, I mean, you can make an argument that guy, that one coworker who was trying to stand up for him at the wake, is going to kind of take that tack. But also, like, you don't know that for sure, So, like, nothing is wrapped up. Life keeps moving along like it's going to. And again, it's one of those things where, like, all you can do is try to affect some sort of change that will stay after you're gone.
No, but I do really kind of like, there's that, and I kind of like that you don't know how his son feels, because like I want to believe that he goes on to like live a rich life because he knows how quickly it can be taken from you, but we don't know. He could just keep being kind of a jerk.
Let's do movie lists.
Let's do it. Ooh,
should we do movie lists?
Ooh, is this on?
Let's do movie lists.
I'm curious, because I feel like it's not the one that people go to on Kurosawa.
No, it's not. And that's the other fascinating thing I find about this movie is like it's as good as anything he's ever done.
Yeah,
I think.
Easily. But it's not the first one that anyone recommends.
Right. Because there's no Mifune, there's no samurai, and so like those iconic, like, here's what we know about Kurosawa as Western audiences, like none of that is there. But it's great. It's great. This one in High and Low, I think I have the same feeling about.
Yeah, it's like, it's not the first one. I would tell you to like start with Seven Samurai, but still watch the rest.
Yeah. But it did get it's got an honorable mention in our best closing shots of all time.
Ooh.
Which is the one I was just talking about with the coworker there. Kids on the swing, and then they leave the swing, and then there's a moment of the empty swing, and then we kind of pan up to the bridge, and that guy is up there, looking down. It's Watanabe's little bit of immortality.
Yeah.
As I think Cal mentioned, but I doubt it. It was probably me that said that.
Yeah, Cal. What did he say?
It was me that said it. It might show up on a list of top 10 political movies that will be coming out.
Spoilers.
I think a couple weeks. Yeah. Don't be surprised if you see it on top 10 political movies.
That's an interesting pick.
Yeah. Well, it's about the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Outside of that, no, it's not been on any other lists. Do I need to get it on any other lists?
You know what could be a list that I feel like there's more than enough like movies and subcategories for? Movies about death.
Yeah. We did one. What was it? It was like it was brilliant moments of off-screen death or something.
Oh, this is a good one.
Moments where you suddenly feel the absence of somebody.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of just like broadly speaking, movies about death, yeah, I absolutely. I think we could muster an entire list out of that for sure.
Oh yeah, movies where the guy just really gets it, man, makes you just think.
And one of these days, we need to do a list.
That's the literal headline, like movies that just get it,
at
man.
The end of it. Like movies that just get it, man. This movie just.
I would click on that.
I mean?
I would watch that.
And then, am I right?
Am I right? That's the description.
Yeah, right. ... question mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, look for that. That won't take long to make. Look for that next week.
I'm glad it showed up on a couple, though, or at least honorable mention for one.
It did. But no, I think even for us as well, like that's part of the deal is like this is not the go-to Kurosawa.
Yeah.
Like I think it's, like I said at the top of this episode, like there's that 10-year plateau where everything's tied for first from Kurosawa, and like this is right there with him. It's as good as anything he's ever done, but it's maybe the 5th, 6th movie that you would recommend.
Oh, 100%.
Or that gets recommended in terms of like, oh, you've never seen a Kurosawa film? Okay, start, and like you can get down to 6 or 7 movies before you rattle off Ikiru.
You made a good point about like No Mifune being in here. I feel like that's such a hallmark of his movies too. So it feels so different. And I think, I don't want to blow a torf, but I feel like there's reasons for that. And yeah, I'm realizing that I would have blown it.
Well, before we blow a torf, let's go to torf. Let's torf.
Yeah. Well, it's just you, Clint. So that'll make it easier.
No pressure. If I can get a 2-up with Cal's picture next to me, appreciate that.
Maybe I'll try to see if like I can guess what Cal would have said if he were still with us. Okay. True or false? Co-writer Hideo Ogune originally envisioned the main character as a Yakuza.
Oh.
Yeah.
Man. I'm gonna say true, but I hope not, and I'm glad that you changed it.
Yeah, it's true, which I find very interesting.
Yeah.
According to Ogune, the genesis of the film was Kurosawa's desire to make a film about a man who knows he is going to die and wants a reason to live for a short time. Initially, Kurosawa told writers that the character's career was less important, with the director saying criminal, homeless man, or government minister would be acceptable. I feel like this is a time where Kurosawa was very, very wrong. And I'm glad he had someone to be like, no, incorrect.
Criminal, homeless man, or government minister.
Which, by the way, I love
that those three are looped together. Yeah, that's a. No, I think this is a massively less interesting movie if it's a criminal, if it's a Yakuza.
I feel like it could come across like really cliche. Like, I don't know, it just wouldn't have the same.
Yeah,
impact.
well, and that's like the thing that it changes is like if it's a criminal, particularly a violent criminal like somebody involved with the Yakuza, it's the red on your ledger thing that Black Widow likes to say, right?
Yeah.
It's the like that's making up for horrible things, as opposed to just looking up and realizing that you've slowly died over the past 30 years.
And that's the whole point of the movie. It's not,
yeah,
and he's not a badass. He's quite the opposite. He was just sitting there kind of rotting for 30 years.
And it's not like he suddenly has a change of heart about all the evils he's perpetrated over the years. It's just like, oh God, I missed everything.
I'm a mummy.
Like, yeah.
And I have oily skin.
Anyway.
God.
Good. Okay, per all of my friends, I have oily skin. But good call, not being a Yakuza.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't. It would still be good, I'm sure, but not nearly as good. All right, true or false? A DreamWorks English remake is in the works with Tom Hanks starring in the lead role.
Ooh. I know they just remade it with Bill Nighy 4 or 5 years ago.
2022.
It wouldn't surprise me if if ye old Hollywood got a crack at it with Tom Hanks. That would make a lot of sense.
So true?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure, true.
Gotcha. It's false, but as there always is with Tayo, there's a glimmer of truth. DreamWorks planned to remake the film in English in 2003 with Tom Hanks starring in the lead role. Jim Sheridan was going to direct with Richard Price writing the screenplay, but it fell through.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. True or false? The working title for the film was Seikatsu, which is the Japanese word for lifestyle. Kurosawa later renamed the film to Ikiru, which means to live or to be alive.
Oh, see, now I'm hesitant because I think there's going to be some tomfoolery.
Okay, so the second part
because
is true.
I do know. The second part is
Yeah.
true. I do know that it wasn't always called Ikiru, but I don't know. I don't remember. I stumbled across this at some point. I think it just. I don't know what it was originally called, so I'm going to go true-ish.
Okay. I'm going to say you're wrong.
Half a point.
No,
Oh,
I'm just gonna
okay.
say you're wrong. Well, it's
Great.
true that it had another title, but the working title was The Life of Kanji Watanabe, which is much less
which is
subtle. Yeah.
Well, let's move on from there to the. This is a segment that I always introduce.
Yeah. That you came up with.
Beginning since I came up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going to put Nicolas Cage in this movie?
There are some movies where this segment does not work.
Kurosawa film from 1952. Where are we putting Nicolas Cage?
Gosh.
I want to say the deputy mayor, but that would pretty much just be a cameo. I wouldn't mind. I know I just gave him the MVP, but I wouldn't mind seeing a version of this movie with Nick Cage as Watson.
That's kind of where I'm at. Like if we're remaking this movie, for example, as we were just saying, like where would I put Nicolas Cage? He could do the Watanabe role for sure.
He's also done a little bit of that with, what was the movie, the Weatherman or the Family Man? What was the one where it was another very like Capra-esque.
See, this is where we need Cal, because I don't know his filmography as well as Cal.
yeah, but it was in that phase of things where he was like a romantic leading man too. It was like Antonioni, where
Well, the thing is too, like this movie is so like man against the world that like that is really the only prominent role he can hold. Like anything else, like you were saying, is going to feel like a cameo. Like, I can't see him as the son by any means, and I'm sure it would be
Nicolas Cage showing up to take Watanabe out on the town. Like,
oh wait, that would actually be great. I'm down for that as a novelist. Cool. Yeah, no, I'm here for that.
Yeah, just like this crazy force of nature.
Wait, that could be in the original.
Let's go.
Wait, I kind of like that, putting that in Kurosawa's film where he's like some crazy like tourist. I would watch that.
Oh, that would be incredible,
right? That would be fun.
It's just kind of an expat.
Yeah,
I'd take that.
But you know what? That's where I'm landing. I'm landing novelist instead of Watanabe.
I think we talked ourselves both into it.
I think we did.
All right, this movie, we know where this is going on the list because we put it in place of Uncut Gems last week, which was at number 93. I didn't have it on my list. Did you have it on yours?
No. I think I only put one Kurosawa. I think my only Kurosawa is Seven Samurai, actually.
Cal watched it for the first time for this episode.
So it'd be weird if it was on
it's not on his list. So
it's a Dan joint?
It's a Dan-ass movie. I'm told Dan had it at number 31.
A Dan-ass movie.
Do you have the envelope there?
Yeah,
where did it,
I do.
Was it before it bumped up to number 93?
Oh, so that's what's in the envelope. Okay.
I guess, unless it just says number 93.
Oh, so its original rank was 121, new rank 93. Just barely on the...
Dan having it at 31 had it at 121, and then it feels like if it's on one list and it's in the top 20.
Yeah, top 20. I think that's the bar. It has to be top 20.
Somewhere in there, yeah. 30 is too high to only be on one list and actually make the top 100. So
I think Dan really likes Kurosawa because I think Seven Samurai was an Alex and Dan joint.
Dan he's back on his broken clock shit. You know, he can be right every now and then.
You hate to see it.
I hate to see it, but it happens. You know?
Yeah. Wait, would you put this on your list if we were to go back in time?
I might. That's one thing that we do need to do with the show. And honestly, like, as we get farther into the show, that's the thing that I'm more interested about is like the structure of these lists and like how, because to be perfectly honest, I think I've said this before in other episodes, like I shot from the hip.
Oh, me list. Too.
Like I put thought into, I don't want to say I just wrote down the first 100 movies that came to mind, but like I didn't rewatch every movie ever made for sure. Mm-hmm. But you know, there's a lot that I just didn't even think about, that didn't even occur. Ikiru being one of those, right, that I didn't even consider for top 100. But so yeah, I at some point we need to go back. One of these seasons we need to go back and redo our lists and see how things fall. I guess once we
I was gonna. This show could maybe just never end.
Awfully presumptuous. Yeah, awfully presumptuous to be like, yeah, no, we're gonna be doing this for
yeah.
Yeah, one of these days I would like to go back and move some things around and sort of reformat the list and see what that does. But
I also don't know if this is cheating, but I had some movies that like I want to strong arm onto the list that I failed to do, and now it's like, well, now I know top 20.
Oh,
that's how you do. But that might be cheating. So
yeah,
maybe not. But
right.
Oh well, who's gonna stop me?
Well,
Dan.
Nobody.
Yeah, what's Dan gonna do?
Certainly, honestly, his algorithm might.
Yeah,
I'm starting to get a little scared of it.
It is strong.
All right. Well, on behalf of both Alex Stedman and the ghost of Michael Calabro, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for watching Ikiru. I'm glad I got a chance to watch it again.
Same.
And potentially cheat and put it back on my list somewhere. But I appreciate you guys picking it last week when I gave the boot to Uncut Gems. So,
I was surprised that was our pick, but it was a good pick. I got to hand it to us.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real like knee-jerk kind of, you know, pendulum swing of a choice.
Again,
being
the anti-uncut gems,
gems,
which is so funny to me that it's taking its place. I kind of like it.
No,
it's symbolic.
Yeah, it's good to have some friends to get through the movie. You know, it's one of those.
Yeah.
But thank you also to Head of Public Works, Producer Tayo Oyekan, Co-Deputy Assistant Interim Chiefs of Public Affairs, Technical Producers, Marhyan, Franzen, and Amir Rakib, Intern in the Public Health Department, DP Jamie Parslow, and I feel like Dan is just a deputy mayor, he's waiting until we die so he can take credit for this whole thing. So no thanks to Dan.
No.
But come back next week as we continue Season 3 Alone Against the World by watching the only sensible companion piece to Ikiru, Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
What whiplash we have on this list.
Yeah, no, we keep doing it to Uncut Gems.
It's really our fault.
Ikiru,
we can't even blame the algorithm, I feel.
No, I feel like we have more control than this, or we ought to.
Yeah.
But why not? Anyway, until then, stay safe, be good. We'll see you next time.